Hello, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyenini. This morning, as all over the globe, there is a thinking of easing up the restrictions on the coronavirus pandemic. We ask if Ghana is on the winning ways as it records spikes in its recoveries. But how should the country manage the people coming in, including this morning from Kuwait? We also will look at the Auditor General's report that finds that some 7,823 ghosts have been paid almost 600 million in salaries. Who are these? Where are they? And why does this canker continue to eat the public purse? Over 130 former MPs and government appointees from 10 years ago seek almost 30 million Ghana cedis alleged salary arrears. The Auditor General has advised the presidency not to okay this, not to pay. What are the factual, legal, and moral justification that some potential beneficiaries like Osei Mensah Bonsu are putting up? Now, some of these ex-MPs are actually ghosts. And then we will find time, keep to our promise last week, examining the Amidu age judgment. Any implications for public service? Whose report do you believe? The majority of the bench of the Supreme Court or the minority dissenting opinion? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show, and I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyenini. And I'll shelve my take. We'll talk about it next week. I take on the Parliament of Ghana for its attitude in vetting, particularly judges, and a parliament that has no history of doing what should be a certain scrutiny required of people who go for an interview, and which may not serve this country the very best. So we'll do that next week. My guest this morning, seated here in the studio, is Joseph Dindiok Kwenka, who is MP Timpani and Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Samson.
Also joining us via Zoom, and that will be shortly, Kweku Asari, Professor Stephen Kweku Asari of the CDD Ghana and D&D Fellow for Public Law and Justice. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us.
Thank you, Samson. Thanks for having me.
Great. Right. We will also be joined later by Godfrey Yeboah Dame, who is Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice. But right now, and starting on the issues of coronavirus, coronavirus and how to contain the pandemic in these times is Dr. John Amwesi, lecturer, Global Health Department, School of Public Health, KNUST, and leader, Global Health and Infectious Disease Research Group at the KCCR. Doc, thank you as always.
It's a pleasure, Samson. I'm happy to come to you and your listeners again this morning.
Great. All right, so we have counted to the 6,000 and we are climbing, but the good news we are discovering is that our recoveries are recording a spike to the extent some people are in unbelief, in a state of unbelief that we could record so much, recoveries within a very short time. What do you make of the development?
No, thank you very much, Samson. I think that it is definitely good news to hear that we have recoveries from coronavirus here in Ghana. I guess the question that people are asking is, to what degree is it true that we have people recovering at the rate at which they are said to be recovering? Now, you recall, and again, thank you for the opportunity to bring information to listeners across Ghana and across the world. You recall I mentioned in some of my submissions that I believe that there are a lot more cases or a lot more positive people from coronavirus across the entire country than have been reported, not necessarily because this information is being kept away from the public, but because we are just not able to see or measure the degree to which people are affected. Now, suffice it to say, if that holds true, then one must not be surprised by the numbers of recoveries that are being reported at this time, because the literature and the evidence on the ground suggests that this disease leads to almost 50% plus being asymptomatic. You'd end up with a good majority of people who have this disease not showing any symptoms at all. Mm-hmm. And out of those who may show symptoms, the vast majority will recover. So if in one breath we are arguing that there are so many people who may be infected beyond the numbers that have been reported, then in the same way, we should be able to argue that there'll be a lot more recoveries than the numbers that have been recorded. So that's one issue. The other is you look at the numbers that have been recorded or that have been reported, and you look at the period of time that has gone past, right? And when you have the disease, you are either dead within 2 maximum to 3 weeks, or you would maybe be on a ventilator for a protracted period of time. And we do not have large numbers of people on ventilators. As far as I know, we may not even have 5 people on ventilators, but I must say I cannot verify these numbers. These are just my extrapolations. So if we had a certain quantum of people who were ill or were positive, let's put it that way, from coronavirus at least 2 or 3 weeks ago, all those people who were said to have been positive 2 or 3 weeks ago, by now, if they're not dead, they would be recovered. And that's just what it is. Okay. The challenge we are facing is that we're not able to test as routinely as we should be testing because of the limited capacity that we have, both by way of infrastructure as well as finances. So that means that there'll be a lot of people who may be recovered, but just waiting, sitting on the touchlines for a test, or just being held in an isolation center or at home or in a hospital, just waiting for a test result to come through for them to be declared negative, right? So I must say, in all honesty, that there is no surprise regarding the numbers. I personally expect a lot more recoveries, just like I did expect a lot more to be infected.
Okay. So 6,617, we have 1,978, almost 2,000 recoveries. Should we be celebrating this in a manner to suggest that we are on winning ways to overcoming the pandemic?
I think that's a great question, Samson, and you can choose to celebrate for one reason or the other. I wouldn't say that this is a pointer that we are on the winning side or in a winning direction. What it suggests is we have done well by not allowing people to progress from asymptomatic disease to mild disease and then even to severe disease, which will result in death.
Okay.
One thing is clear, and which is that our death rate is low. It is low by global standards, and it is very low even by African standards, which in themselves are low by global standards. Now, talk about celebration because of recovery rates. I think it's good news anytime anybody recovers, and it's a reason for celebration in itself. But the question is, at what rate are people getting infected? You begin to celebrate when you can clearly show that the rate at which people are getting infected is going down. It is going down to a point where you can afford to get people to move about and go about their normal duties without fear of a resurgence in the disease.
Right.
That is the point at which you celebrate. But definitely having so many recoveries, and there will be many more, is good news.
You're right. So we have 245 citizens being deported by Kuwait. So we expect them in the country today. They definitely will be quarantined, as we understand, at the cost of the state. We also understand that you have a huge numbers of Ghanaian citizens who are still, stranded outside of the country elsewhere because of the lockdowns that happened. And the government is looking at granting special permissions for them to be flown back to the country. Is there any danger in bringing in these new numbers of people at a time we are seeking to ease up the restrictions?
No, it's another great question, Samson, and I think we need to draw a distinction between people who are being deported or people who are being repatriated and people who the country would go and collect, to put it so bluntly, from other countries. My understanding is this group of people are being deported, so it's more like we don't really have a choice but to let them in. But that might even be beside the point. What really matters is that whoever comes in does not put the rest of the population in danger. And the way you go about doing this, which I think has been spelled out pretty clearly, is that you isolate these individuals, or let me not say isolate, you have to quarantine these individuals and test them serially until you can confirm that they're disease-free.
Right.
The good thing is that we have demonstrated here in Ghana, we have the capability to do this with the 1,000+ who returned on the last couple of flights, and we were able to pick out those who were infected. So at a personal level, I am not worried at all, given that they will be quarantined and will be tested. The risk is relatively minimal. These are people who are being deported. But if I'm to speak to people who we should actively go and collect, people who we should pick up, like send a plane to do rounds on the west coast of Africa or do rounds in Europe and pick up Ghanaians who want to come home because they're stranded, that might be a slightly different question that we could look at in different ways. But ultimately, if the choice is made, then the quarantine would have to be instituted, the serial measurements for infection would have to be instituted, as well as continued follow-up when these individuals are finally allowed to join the rest of the population.
Right. The new vocabulary, living with the virus, the new normal, is what we are getting into now. What does it take to live with the virus and not record, or to begin to open up to live with the virus and not record the spikes that we have seen other countries record as they began to ease up? We have seen, for example, the Electoral Commission issue a poster talking about how it intends to go through a registration process. What do you make of all of that? How do we ensure that when we're easing up, we don't put ourselves in a bigger danger?
No, thanks, Samson. I think this is a question that everybody is asking at all levels in this country, that how do we get on with our lives in the face of this virus? Because obviously we cannot continue to hunker down and just hide ad infinitum. at a point we need to lift our heads and make the best of the situation. It's a bit of a tricky question because you can only answer this when you have a clear visual of what the possibilities are. I'm sure you've seen the reportage from South Africa where their modelers and other scientists have made projections as to what should be expected if people are allowed to gather and life should return to normal. What should be expected? The question is, we're looking at people being infected, people falling ill, people dying. This is where you need to, this is how you need to divide it up. If it's just about people getting infected, we already know that people get infected and majority don't get sick. So if we're able to suggest that many people get infected, but look, this isn't going anywhere, it's just going to be like a common flu kind of thing, that's fine. If we can say that, okay, X number of people are going to go into hospital, but we have the capacity to take care of these people, we have enough beds, even though they may be sick, that's also fine, maybe. But then, if there are going to be so many deaths, that's something that you don't want and something that you cannot take care of because death is a final event. Now, that being said, you want to look carefully at the deaths that we have recorded in Ghana, which as I've mentioned, have been on the low side relative to Africa and relative to global, and even the whole Africa has been very low relative to global. Now, what is the reason for which we have recorded such a low number of deaths? It is because of our ability to identify those who are positive as quickly as possible, which means that if we enter into a situation where we're not able to identify people as quickly as possible, we will have greater progression to severe disease and therefore greater progression to death, which means that if there is any intention or effort to move back to normal, to open up, it must be combined not only with an increase in hospital capacity and personnel, but also with testing capacity across the board. You want to do the two together so that whoever falls ill on account of being exposed because we're trying to go back to normal should be able to be treated as quickly as possible, to be quarantined or to be isolated as quickly as possible and treated so that the deaths will go down. Now, the reason why I keep harping on death is that it's a very interesting metric. It's a metric which is hard to hide and a metric which is hard to dispute. Because if you look at countries like Brazil, now Brazil has the second highest number of deaths, second highest number of cases, people are dying by the numbers, even though the government there is making statements to suggest otherwise. People are measuring the rate at which graves are being dug. There's aerial photos of graves being dug open and waiting for people to be buried in there. Now, that's one thing you cannot hide from. If people were dying in masses in Ghana, that's something that nobody can hide. If graves were being dug at an increased rate, that's something nobody can hide. And if there was even an increase in all-cause mortality in Ghana, even assuming we did not know it was corona, we would be able to say, okay, there's more people dying in April and May in Ghana than it was last year, last 2 years, even though we don't know what it is. Could it be corona? And we could, hypothesize. But we don't see any of these figures. So these are things that cannot be hidden. So I have every confidence that the evidence of our death rate being low is clear. What I don't have clear evidence on is our infection rate, because I've kept on saying this over and over again, we're not really measuring this in the way that we should. Now, with all these being said, and easing the restrictions and allowing people to move around, we need to institute, aside from the routine testing across the board, the ability to measure systematically on a daily basis and be aggregating on a weekly basis to see where we are. Because it's when you see where you are that you're able to make decisions and be able to make changes. Now, the question I would ask is, we're going ahead to do elections, looking at December. Come out with guidelines, which are very well known. These are things that are already being practiced. So all the guidelines are perfectly in order. They are scientific. But are we willing, or will we be willing as a country that as we measure towards December, let's say by October, we realize that things are not going very well. And therefore, if we should have an election or we should have people gathering for an election, there's going to be a challenge. Will we be willing to say, look, we wanted to have an election, we're planning towards it, but we're looking at the numbers, and at this time, we think we've got to turn back. I realize it's very complicated because you plan for elections way ahead. There's a lot of things you need to put in place way ahead. But I would say that even if the Olympics could be called off at short notice, because the evidence was so clear, and you saw how Japan tried to hold on to the last minute to just have these elections by all means. But the number, it was clear that this just was not possible. They could not press ahead. Of course, it's different for governments, but I would encourage that, yes, we can go ahead and start planning. That's fine. Put out all the measures and instructions, but also be measuring. And put it also out there that if we measure and we get to point A, point B, point C, point D, these will be what we will do, including options of pulling it off the table, if really there's a need to do so. I don't think it's a do or die situation. So we should be guided by the evidence. Issue, right now, there is no evidence to suggest don't do it. There is no evidence to suggest do it. So
the issue coming up is within this same period, we are going to have mass gatherings 2 times or even more. During the registration, you are going to have a lot of massive human interaction and gathering. There's also, after the registration, there would have to be exhibition. So that's another second, mass interaction. And then you would have an election. If you are not lucky and the elections don't produce a presidential candidate, a president, you will do another election. So potentially, we are looking at 4 different occasions when all Ghanaians will have to interact in such massive respect. What are the prospects of the dangers in that?
No, Samson, I like the way you phrase the question, because it really evokes a classic public health disease control, disease spread scenarios. You have mass gathering events over a protracted period of time. The interesting thing is that this even includes travel. So people are going to be traveling across the country to exercise their constitutional right. So there's going to be an increase in movement, increase in gathering. That's your worst case scenario. I mean, this is really what propagates disease: travel and gathering. All right. So this is very clear. But the argument is, what will be the state of coronavirus infection in the country by that time? It is very unlikely that corona would have totally disappeared by that time. If it has disappeared, not that it is impossible, but if it has disappeared, hooray, there's no problem. But if it hasn't disappeared, the question will be, what is our infection rate or our reproductive number, as we put it? The reason is, if you have a reproductive number that is below 1, and I've kept mentioning this over and over again, it doesn't mean that the disease is not spreading. It doesn't mean people are not getting it. But what it means is that it has not gone above a point for which spread will be exponential. You will have more cases, but the increase will be more linear, or even less than that. It won't just rise up. It's not something that will get out of control. So if, let's say, we measure and we have a reproductive number of, say, 0.6, and by holding elections, we're going to move up to 0.8, that means that more people have the infection. It might even mean some people might die. But one could argue that, fine, it's not moving us beyond 1. We're not putting ourselves in extreme danger. We can take this. But if this activity is going to take us beyond 1, that means that we have to go back again to all the lockdown measures and extra measures, and there's going to be a lot more infection, a lot more death. That, for me, might not make it worth it. Okay. So the question is it worth it? It's not just the question is, will there be more infections? Of course, when you gather, when you travel, there will be more infections, but how much? Right. And is it worth the risk?
The suggestion that once the EC does the 6 things that it has announced it will do in the registration process, there ought not be fears of the risk of infections. I want to find out from you if that is really the case. And if that is the case, why is it that at the same time that you, the experts, are preaching that we do all these things, you are still preaching that we avoid social gathering? Number 1, it says you must wear your face mask. There will be temperature checks. I don't know if they check and your temperature is at a certain level, you'll be rejected. There's a constitutional question in that, because the Constitution does not allow you to disallow someone of a sound mind and of the age of 18 from voting or registering to vote. Then 3, there will be hand washing. 4, there will be social distancing. Maintain a minimum of 1 meter distance whilst you are in the queue. 5, there will be scanner wipes. And then the 6, there will be sanitizers for the purposes. The question is this a guarantee to catching the disease in such massive gatherings?
Well, thanks for that, Samson. And I'll be just, really candid here as a professional because you asked the question. It's definitely not a guarantee. I can tell you that straightforward. It is not a guarantee. They are only measures which, if followed, will reduce the risk of transmission. You've heard stories of people who self-isolated for weeks and just maybe came outside to pick up a parcel and ended up having coronavirus. They did all the right things. They only picked up a parcel, maybe even disinfected it, but it was too late. So none of the measures that have been put forward, not only for elections, but for any other activity, are foolproof, and they are not guarantees. They're only risk reduction. It is much like, wearing your seatbelt, making sure your tires are at the right pressure, and exercising regularly, taking your vitamins, and all these other things which are preventive measures are not foolproof, and they're not guarantees. What I would say is that these measures work in tandem with the level of risk.
Okay.
With the level of risk. I mean, if you are riding in a Mercedes-Benz or any other luxury vehicle with all the airbags and with all the safe bells and whistles for safety, and the road itself is riddled with potholes and you're speeding, you can, and most likely will still have an accident. So these are not foolproof, but if the road is good, then all these things come in, and their contribution to protecting you from an accident are much higher.
All right.
So we should really return to what is the rate of spread of the disease.
Okay.
And at the time, inching out to the elections, what is the rate of spread? That should inform our decision. Okay. What I like to see is further mention that we are putting all these things in place. However, if we should get to point A, we will turn back. If we get to point B, we will increase the number of days over which an election can be held. But I realize these are really complicated. I mean, very, very difficult situation.
That's
I
right.
think it's okay to plan now, but we must be ready if we need to pull the plug, if we need to.
Thank you very much.
I should mention this, Samson.
Right.
Just one point regarding the spread of the disease and elections. You saw what happened in France. I mean, France took what I think was a wrong decision when the disease had just started spreading to have some local elections. And it had a profound impact on the spread of the disease in that country. This was very clear. But you realize that this happened just when the disease was spreading, which was exactly the wrong time to do these kinds of things. It's a different scenario from us. But it's just to tell you that nobody's kidding themselves.
My final question to you will be your observation of this particular situation where the members of parliament who are sitting here, and I'll ask them that question before we get into the other issues we are going to discuss. They had given us the impression that one of the ways to encourage the nation and rally people around to be open about the virus and not to stigmatize, to be willing to submit themselves to testing, isolation, and quarantine, was that they were going to conduct the test, they will make it open, people will get to see, and it will, affect their psyche. And then when the results are in, they will let the public know. So everybody knows what their status is. Now there is a bit of a U-turn or some decision of sort that says their results will not be disclosed. What's your take on that?
I think that's a very, very interesting question, Samson. By law, as you would know better as a lawyer, that one's medical records, fall under the Information Protection Act or whatever law, where you just cannot disclose someone's medical records unless they explicitly want it so.
But a public health emergency as declared by the state through EI 61 and public safety purposes, that can be an exception to that rule. that your record is confidential.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, Samson. I was just developing a point right
Please
there.
go ahead.
I was just trying to point out that every individual has a right to hold their results back. But I thought that it was really a brilliant suggestion in the beginning that this would be done. But it would have a greater effect if it turns out that some were positive and some were negative. Not that I wish any of our honorable members to be positive, but then it would have such an effect for people to see that, hey, we've got people who are the helm of affairs. Some are positive and some are negative, and they are out there with that information. However, if it turns out, and most likely will be the case, that all of them are negative, I'm not too sure how that would really increase the impact of that intervention. Nonetheless, I would, on a personal level, really encourage our members of parliament that if they are able to, this would be a big statement across the divide, both in the government and the opposition, to demonstrate that, look, this is all of us together. And we have our private lives, but we're willing to open up our private lives in the interest of the nation to let you know and understand that you have to get tested, and it's okay to make your test results known to your loved ones and to people close to you. And because we are your leaders, we are close, you are close to us, you mean much to us, and we're willing to share with you our private lives by way of our results. So I think it could have a great effect. I'd encourage them to do this, but they have every right to choose not to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. John Amwesi, Lecturer, Global Health Department, School of Public Health, KNUST, and leader, Global Health and Infectious Diseases Research Group at the KCCR. Thank you very much once again, Doc. Right.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Yes. So let me pick your views briefly on this, and then we take a break. We come to visit the Auditor General's, office, and then after that, we will try to examine the Amidu report. Not try, we will actually examine it into detail today. And you have the former Deputy Attorney General here, you have present Deputy Attorney General here, and you have another present Deputy Attorney General who is joining us on the line. So get ready and enjoy this. Professor Stephen Kukwasari is also on the line. If you have been reading, he also has a very interesting view. That view supports the minority view and sort of tells the majority that they were so wrong in the manner in which they proceeded with the Amidu age decision. Now, let me start with you, Professor Kukwasari. What do you make of the members of parliament, the decision that we are getting to know now, that their test results will not be made public? What is the impact of that on what it was supposed to serve, to encourage more people to not run away from isolation and testing and stigmatization?
Samson, thank you very much. I think the doctor you had before spoke eloquently to this issue. I like to talk about things that I think I know a little bit about. I don't know a whole lot about public health issues. I know that as a matter of law, people have an expectation of privacy to their health record. And so I don't want to wade into something that I lack the technical competence.
So let me ask you on the legal side, should the privacy be upheld even in a public health matter? I have the right, according to Article 18 of the Constitution, for the privacy of my correspondence and communication not to be interfered with. Because of this pandemic, by virtue of EI 61 and EI 63, I have lost my privacy. What are we talking about?
Well, obviously we are in an emergency situation, and I would add that I don't think the emergency has been properly declared, but we are in one, and once you are in an emergency, then the government has the power to do certain things, but it doesn't mean it has the power to do everything. So while they could interfere with your communication, which I don't think a good case has been made, it doesn't mean, for instance, they could expose your health record. It doesn't mean, for instance, they could take your life. So the issue then is of the plethora of rights that people have. Which of them is the government reasonably allowed to interfere with in an emergency? I believe that's the way we got to balance the issue. So certain things they can stop us from doing. For instance, your right to worship can be temporarily interfered with. But I don't think the government should then have the power to go into my medical records. That would be going too far, I think.
Okay, so hold on quickly. Why are you guys not ready to, encourage your constituents and the whole nation to be hooked up to the idea that it's okay to get tested, it's okay to get isolated, and so on. It's okay. It's unfortunate if you get tested, positive, but is it negative, positive? But you might get healed.
Samson, thank you very much. I have listened already. We've listened to two persons this morning on this vexed topic. And let me state preliminarily that this matter is one that is novel. All of us are aware of it. And we'll have to also find novel ways of dealing with it, as it has come up as a novel situation for all of us to grapple with. But Samson, just to be simplistic on this matter, assuming that in constituency A, somebody, the MP goes to test and you declare him to be positive. Now you announce it to the whole world in a society where there is so much stigma and stigmatization for that matter. And that man gets back to his constituency. And you are seeking
to beat down the stigma.
Yes, we are seeking to beat it down.
Go ahead, and that man gets to...
Of course, so he gets to his constituency, and because of this element of stigma and etc., you can imagine even in the midst of what is happening, the election year and etc., what is going to happen to the person. In some parts of the country, the person is out of public service. I can tell you, there's no dispute about it. Because it's going to be, people will even incite others that when he's coming, run away. That's a statement of fact I'm telling you.
That's what you intend by your openness to avoid.
Yes,
to discourage.
You see, the point is this. What we have to do is to balance this in a manner as not to affect even, look, that can even affect the health. It can deteriorate the health of the person who is tested positive.
Your opponent may even converse that you should not be voted for.
You see, all that I think...
You are a candidate of death.
Yes, I think what we should be doing rather is that we should continue to maintain the situation, confidentiality of health status, but ensure that the safety protocols as enumerated by all the health professionals are strictly adhered to. But one thing that frightened me a little bit this morning was when I listened to the professional. He sought to say that, yes, it is just to minimize the rate of spread if we go through the safety protocols and etc. But I thought that is rather meant to ensure that we don't contract it. If I wear the mask, I sanitize, I wash my hands, I practice social distancing and etc. I thought that is meant to ensure that I don't contract the disease at all.
Yes, so that's the same thing he said.
No, he didn't say so. He says that it's only meant to minimize the risk of spread. Right. But I thought that is not what I have been understanding all this while.
So he's the expert. He should listen to him.
That's what I'm saying. I thought that all this while, that is not what I have understood it to be.
All this while, I have understood that whilst I practice all these protocols,
uncontracted
protocols,
yes,
I should avoid gatherings. It is the reason that we have a law that has banned gatherings.
But that's why something, I don't know, you are going back to the same thing. What I'm saying is that you practice social distancing, you sanitize, you wash your hands,
you reduce the risk of infection.
You wear your mask at all times. Right. What is the purpose? Is it not meant for you to ensure that you don't contract the disease?
Reducing the fundamental risk.
The fundamental reason for all these is to ensure that you don't contract it.
Reduce the risk. No, but like the experts have said over and again, and the World Health Organization has emphasized these practices are not a cure. They are only to reduce the risk.
Yes, of course, we're not saying it's a cure. In any case, I mean, you don't cure it by wearing this. It is to prevent you from contracting. That's what I understand it to mean. That when I practice these safety protocols and etc., it will prevent me from contracting. But from what he
actually reduce the risk of contracting. Let's keep to the medical, explanation.
Yes.
Which is general across the globe.
So yes.
Right.
Assuming even that I agree with you totally that it will reduce the risk of infection and etc.
Right.
Ultimately, the purpose of this practice by all of us ensure that we don't have it. Ultimately, that is why we are going through all these protocols. This morning, I have had to sanitize. My learned senior at the bar had to sanitize. When we got to the reception we did, we had to wash our hands and all
we may do it many times before we leave here. This very desk gets sanitized over and again.
You see, something, there's something that I want our health professionals to actually advise us. And this is it. Now, assuming that we come to live with COVID-19 as malaria, for the rest of our lives, what do we do?
Yeah. Okay.
Assuming COVID-19 becomes malaria, what do we do for the rest of our lives?
Dominic, before you guys got tested, we had some of you speak so positively and emphatically, including Ras Mubarak, that what you intend to do is part of the process to reduce the stigma, discourage those who are running away from getting tested. We are told of people who are just running away. They don't want to be tested. They don't want to be isolated.
Yeah. Oh, something, I don't know what has informed leadership's decision to, reverse themselves on this matter.
You don't support it?
It's not that I can't, until I know the reasons given by leadership, I cannot, declare whether or not I want to support it or I won't support it. But what I have to say, in addition to the views that my colleague has just, put forward, is that we need to be careful because you don't have an empirical basis for asserting that either taking the test, okay, or even announcing the results will have an impact on the public perception of the nature of the disease and then what your followers or your constituents will do. For instance, I would have expected a situation where...
No, but that's a natural consequence. That's taken for granted.
No, so something, why is it that
the fact that you are such huge role models that once they see that you are doing this and they would definitely follow.
But something, why is it that when the people of Bolga East know that, their MP has been tested, okay, they cannot, because of the fact that I have submitted myself to the test, okay, be encouraged that, after all, our MP has gotten tested,
right,
and therefore we should be, this is something that we can do, and also, continue to live a normal life.
Right.
I think that should be sufficient. But of course, I do agree that if the test results are made public, it will engender public confidence in the testing. But of course, we need to also look at the natural and foreseeable consequences, of making the results public. And as my learned friend has said, if you are, in a contest, in an election year, and then let's say for the sake of argument that I have tested positive for COVID-19, my opponent is on the ground, maybe because he is not an MP, he has not submitted himself to a test. Maybe he's roaming around with COVID-19.
Yes.
But he will go around saying that, look, this man is a candidate for death because he has tested positive for COVID-19. And so if you vote for him, it's most likely that there will be a by-election after or after the election.
The idea is that you think of the greater good.
Yes, we think of the greater good. But the question, my problem is that what is the empirical basis for asserting that going all the way to the publication of the results, all right, will engender more public confidence in testing,
okay,
and then will reduce the stigmatization.
Right.
At least we should have taken maybe a sample, a survey of constituents. Will you want your MP to get tested? And will you want his results published? And if the results are published, will that encourage you, to go get tested? Or that your perception of COVID-19 will change.
Okay.
If we had that kind of survey, sorry, I think my mask is impeding my ability to speak. You know, if we had that kind of empirical evidence or a survey report that would have informed Parliament's decision whether or not, and the extent to which we can go with this matter. Because you see, as Professor Koko Asare has said, and I think you even mentioned Article 18, all right, our privacy is individual to us, all right. It is not something that we can, somebody can waive. So leadership cannot just come and say, okay, it is okay to announce the results of everybody. Some parliamentarians may go to court to try to stop them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so we take a break here, but before we do that, one message from Kwame Sapong Esiedu, whom you have heard on this show a number of times, also assisting us with the COVID discussion. He says, stress. Taking all the precautions like social distancing and hand hygiene are not to ensure that you don't contract the disease, as they are not foolproof. These are risk minimization protocols. Sometimes even the inappropriate application of these risk minimization protocols, like improper wearing and removing of the mask, can increase risk. I think many see these as foolproof, but they are not. We'll be right back visiting the Auditor General's department to ask why over 130 MPs, former MPs, MPs a decade ago, government appointees, some of whom are in government now, some back in parliament now, including former presidents, including dead MPs, seeking about 30 million Ghana cedis as salary arrears alleged. The Auditor General has advised the presidency to reject this. We'll find out, including from Osei Mensah-Bonsu, who is also on the list, whether his justifications are founded. Of course, there are ghosts all around the public service, and they are seeking, and they have been paid almost 600,000, this
400,000, 424 million.
Yes, they have been paid a lot of money. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. All right, so let's begin with the issue of the Auditor General rejecting and advising the presidency that he will not be doing any verification or validation of anything to enable the payment of almost 30 million, that is 29.7 million Ghana cedis in salary arrears, allegedly, to ex-MPs, ministers, deputy ministers, presidents, vice presidents from some 10 years ago. Are his reasons legitimate for rejecting and advising a rejection for these MPs' payments? Some of the potential beneficiaries have been heard saying that the Auditor General is so wrong. He had no business. He should have simply gone ahead and done the validation or verification he was supposed to do, rather than proffering a legal opinion on the process. All right, as you know, Domilevo is not a pushover. Let's begin with Professor Kweku Asare. Prof, what do you make of this development from how you understand where the Auditor General is coming from and where the opponents are coming from?
Well, this is a very interesting governance problem. I'll start with the Auditor General. And you are right that he's rejected a demand from the 2005 to 2009 class of MPs. They wanted 30 million, and he's rejected that. Likewise, I believe, he's also rejected a demand from the DCs of the 1997 and 2001 class. So that is good. What I know, as a matter of fact, is that there has also been an approval for the 2001-2005 class of MPs, and they have been paid 10 million cedis. So we need to dig deeper to figure out how that approval was given that the Auditor General has evinced a clear policy of not allowing this back payment. So that's the Auditor General's issue. Now, in terms of what we are dealing with, it seems to me that it is a conflict, a battle between the executive and the legislature, complicated by two factors. Factor number one is both the executive and the legislature are functus officios in this matter. Second, we are talking about a transaction that has been fully executed. What is the implication of this full execution and the fact that the people involved are functus officio? Well, a couple of implications. The first is neither the current executive nor the current legislature have the power or authority to wade into this issue. In law, we say that the past cannot be recalled by the most absolute power, and that's for the executive. And for the legislative, or the legislature, we say, but if an act be done under a law, a succeeding legislature cannot undo it.
Right.
So this controversy then can only be adjudicated by the judiciary. The people who feel aggrieved, if they want a remedy, they can go to court. And that's where the functus officio come in, because it is feared that a succeeding legislature and executive can enter into some side agreements and undo executed transactions, because most of what they do, or some of what they do, are not in plain sight. But with the judiciary, it is open, and we are all going to see what will go on if it goes to the judiciary. Now, if they choose to go to the judiciary, I'm talking about these old MPs and maybe some old executive members who feel done in, if they choose to go to court, they are likely to face three big problems. Number one, as a matter of law, there is something called the Limitations Act.
That's right.
In Ghana, I think it's NRCD 45 or 54. I can't recall. It's been a while since I looked at that.
Yeah, limitations decree. You go ahead.
What that tells you is if somebody owes you money, you have a certain number of years. I believe it's 6 years. And if you don't assert your right within that period, then you are barred from further trying to recoup that, because people must have their peace of mind. After 6 years, it's enough. If you haven't done anything about it, as a matter of law, you cannot do anything about it. Second, there is something that we call laches. Laches is not a legal right. It's an equitable right. Equity. As a matter of equity, you cannot sleep on your rights and want to assert that. It is said that equity aids the vigilant and not those who slumber on their rights. The third problem that you are going to run into is called estoppel by conduct. When they had this dispute in 2009 with Professor Mills, because Professor Mills basically rejected the Chinri-Hesse report. That's why we have this problem. And he paid them some amount, which I believe was based on the Ishmael-Yamsen report. But whatever it is, he paid them some amount.
Okay.
They did not reject that amount that he paid them.
All right.
They accepted
Okay.
and went home.
All right.
And been home for almost 15 years, because, 2009, almost 10 years. And then suddenly, they wake up and they say, well, pay us the difference.
The difference on the basis, pay us the difference on the basis of the Chinri-Hesse report.
On the basis of the Chinri-Hesse report, yes.
And like you say, they accepted not on the Chinri-Hesse report, but the Ishmael-Yamsen report.
Something else.
Right.
They accepted something else, I think based on the Ishmael-Yamsen report.
Okay.
But whatever it is, they were given something and they were happy with it. The transaction is fully executed. All parties have discharged their obligations. Professor Mills is not even here. Supposing we went to court, that would be another problem. The person who determined that they are not entitled to whatever they think they are entitled to is not even here. That's why there's a statute of limitation, and there are latches, because people die, because witnesses disappear, and so on and so forth. So in my mind, there would not be any legal basis for them to successfully assert this right that they think they can assert.
Okay, Prof.
Now, something I know this will address the question, but there's a deeper problem. And I think after others have spoken, I want us to examine critically the law itself. Article 71, because that's what we are fighting about, Article 71.
Thank you very much.
In my mind, as a country, we have completely misconstrued Article 71.
Okay.
And that's what is causing this problem.
Right. We'll come to that.
Let's talk about that when you had it.
Right. We'll come to that shortly. But what's an exhaustive, researcher approach, a legal researcher, academic researcher approach that he has adopted? If you take it from the point where he says, it would appear that you were paid on the Ishmael-Yamsen report. Now you are coming 10 years later to say that pay us a 20% increase on the basis of the Chinri-Hesse report. If we look at the Chinri-Hesse report, we have been disadvantaged. So on the basis of that, give us a 20% salary arrears in increase. Is the Auditor General right in the conclusions he comes to? He begins to say one thing. He says, apart from the fact that the claim from the Forum of Former MPs is invalid, he says it's invalid. This is where some say he's put himself into a court interpreting law. But you expect that he should just sit there, anything you bring, he should pass it. He's a conveyor belt, that's it. He says the claim from the FFMP is invalid because the Chinri-Hesse report for 2005 to 2009 was rejected. It may also amount to abuse of power or conflict of interest to make additional payments, 20% salary increase per annum for 4 years to former members of parliament, covering a period of 10 to 14 years, especially when some of them are now the executive, i.e. the approving authority. You are no doubt aware that other public servants are denied their salary arrears resulting from employment and promotion through no fault of theirs whenever the arrears goes beyond a number of months. Yes, yeah. Then he makes one other point I should read. It is also a public knowledge. It is also a public knowledge that some MPs were or are undergoing police investigations for receiving double salaries, which implies overpayment. But several of the names are included in the list for the additional payments submitted by the FFMPs per Office of the President letter dated 22nd April 2020. It is my considered opinion that the former MPs are not entitled to what they are asking for, but it also came to me as a big surprise that our honorable MPs, former MPs, are making such a request at a time of a pandemic which has taken the entire world by surprise. Based on the above, I am unable to carry out the audit verification. So that's where he ends it. He raises a number of issues.
Yeah.
President Akufo-Addo is included. He's talking about people who are in government now. He says conflict of interest if they are the ones to approve, among others.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is very clear from the Auditor General's letter that there's certainly a situation of conflict of interest. The reason being that, and I believe historically, what actually happened was that when President Mills took over the reins of government, at the time, I think there were 2 reports based upon Article 71, sorry. There was the Ismail Yamson report, which made recommendations with respect to the salaries and emoluments of Article 71 of his holders, especially those who were exiting, government at the time. And then there was the Chinenhese report. Now, I don't know the circumstances under which the 2 reports were.
That's why I wanted to.
No, let me come.
So that you can go on.
Yes.
I think I wanted to just give you a guess of something. You see,
I'll concede. Okay, go ahead.
You see, the Kufuor regime was 2001 to 2008, right?
Yes.
Now, Ismail Yamson's commission came in the first term, and then in the second term,
that's 2001 to 2004.
Yes, and then Chinenhese came in the second term. When you are exiting, then you put up the committee to make the recommendations.
That's right.
So the earlier one was Yamson, that's the first term. Then the second term was Chinenhese. That was what happened. So the 2 were for the 2 different regimes of 4 years. That's what I wanted to just draw your attention.
Okay, well that is fine. Thanks for the clarification.
The auditor, the Auditor General said this. I think because of what he says, we should bring this one in. He said, he refers to a certain process that says, in that letter, His Excellency stated that Professor Mills is referring to, quote, on March 31, 2009, I set up a 5-member committee under the chairmanship of Mr. Ismail Yamson to revisit the report of the Chinenhese Committee on benefit for office holders under Article 71 of the 1992 Constitution. I have considered the Ismail Yamson Committee report and have accepted the recommendations that the Chinenhese Committee report should not be accepted for implementation for the following reasons. 1, there seems to be more than one final report of the Chinenhese Committee. 2, the Ismail Yamson Committee cannot confirm which of the final reports was allegedly approved. 3, there are uncertainties, ambiguities, and doubts surrounding the Chinenhese report leading to lack of authenticity. And finally, neither the President nor Parliament gave approval as mandated under Article 71(1) and 71(2) respectively of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
Something you see, so that adds even to the confusion.
Yeah.
Because then it means that if we accept as true the chronology of events as put forward by my learned friend, the DAG, then it means that there are two Ismail Yamshin reports. The first was in 2000, I mean the one for 2001-2004. And then the second would be the one that was, commissioned by Professor Mills, then President of the Republic in March 31st, 2009.
Right.
Now, if that is the case, the question then becomes whether the emoluments being sought now are based upon the second Ismail Yamshin report or the Chinirihese report, because it means that there was nothing contentious about the first Ismail Yamshin report. In other words, those people were paid, all right, and they were satisfied with the salary, the emoluments that were paid them at the end of their term. And then subsequently, Chinirihese came with another report, the authenticity of which the President Mills administration could not confirm.
Right.
And that is what, resulted in the setting up of the second Ismail Yamshin, committee that came out with this report. So for me, I think that, as you pointed out earlier, there are very contentious constitutional and legal issues in this matter. And I must say publicly that some of the MPs, the former MPs led by my own former MP, Mr. Apasera,
David
Apasera came, they approached me, they wrote to the Attorney General. And the letter was referred to me, by my boss, the Honorable Mareta. And then I examined their, request for payment. At the time, from the facts that were given to me, and in the letter that I wrote to the Minister of Finance, I put in all the caveats, all right, to the extent that the facts that were given to me, okay, were the facts, that are new at the time of the issuance of the opinion. They had claimed that they were never paid any ex gratia.
Okay.
Despite the fact that Chinirihese recommended that they be paid. And so my opinion to the Minister of Finance was that they should pay them because that was an accrued constitutional entitlement. Subsequently, when I left the office of DAG, I met Mr. David Apasera and I asked him, what was the progress on their matter. He told me that the government was still refusing to pay. That is, the current government was still, the Minister of Finance was refusing to pay. And I told them, I said, look, you see, these are matters that usually you need a third-party arbiter to be able to say whether or not your entitlement is, legitimate. So I advised him, I said, they should get a lawyer, let them file an action in court, and then, the court will decide. Subsequently, I got to know that the High Court had thrown them out, and then they went to the Court of Appeal. And I don't know whether from the Court of Appeal they've gone to the Supreme Court. But from what Professor Asare has said, and from all the issues that you yourself have raised, I think that this is a matter that should be determined by a third-party adjudicator, the judiciary.
But you are suggesting already that they took up a suit and were thrown out. We don't know if they were thrown out on
the basis of limitations of actions,
right,
which is a possibility.
Right.
But then the question can then be raised whether, if it is a constitutional entitlement,
okay,
whether the limitations decree
will apply.
Okay. Now remember, in Tufo and Attorney General, the court was very explicit that where you are dealing with constitutional entitlements,
can never be waived.
You can't equitable rules of extopel cannot be invoked, to prevent the realization of a constitutional entitlement. Okay. So there are, a lot of legal
equitable
issues.
principles generally don't apply where there are statutory or constitutional provisions.
And
covering
then,
the subject
on a last matter regarding the decision of the Auditor General and his categorical statement that it is invalid. You see, we take a very narrow view of the interpretation of statutes and the Constitution. And because in our jurisdiction, Article 2 of the Constitution says that it's the Supreme Court that can interpret and enforce the Constitution, we normally tend to think that anybody who offers an opinion on the Constitution, is usurping the powers of the Supreme Court. But that is not it. On a daily basis, the bureaucracy has to work with the Constitution.
Right.
And they engage in constitutional interpretation of the provisions of the Constitution in order to be able to take steps, you know, to guide themselves or a decision that they have taken.
In fact, chapter 6 of the Constitution
actually
opens with the preamble that all
branches
of you, whoever you are, whatever you do, you must be on the basis of the application of the directive principles of state policy. Yeah. And so interpretation is done by everyone else somewhere. Yes. So where do you stand on this?
In my submission, yeah. Two quick things.
So your conclusion is that they should rather be thinking about a third-party arbiter
that is
going to court.
Yes.
But they have been thrown out by the High Court before.
Yes, you see, the caveat that I entered is very important because the facts they presented to me
were different.
And you can take the file in the department to see what I did. The facts they presented to me were different.
Okay.
It was that they were never paid. They were not looking for
that they were not paid ex gratia. It's not a question of coming for 20% increase as a result of
another controversy even arises from the submissions that we are all making this morning, a very serious one, and I want us to avert our minds to it.
Okay.
Whether when a committee is appointed by the outgoing president and makes recommendations, a new president can reject the recommendations of the committee that recommended the previous one appointed by a different president. That's another controversy.
Right.
Because
for payment to members of parliament.
Yes.
The committee's reports must be approved by the president.
Yes.
So you are paid on what the president approves.
Yes.
Not what the committee says.
Absolutely, I agree.
Good.
So what I'm saying is
for the MPs, for the president, it is what you, the MPs, approve.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is this: Chinrihesi Committee was appointed by His Excellency President Kufuor to look into the emoluments. Okay, and the ex gracias specifically. That was the mandate. And that was the outgoing president of the republic at the time.
Right.
Now, I have heard arguments from some of the former MPs that the recommendations given by the Chinrihesi Committee were actually approved by former President Kufuor. I've heard that on air. Some of them have argued it on air and etc., including the venerable.
The Auditor General appears to have done a thorough job and comes to the conclusion that he doesn't see the basis.
Yes, so you see, let me say that I have even sought clarification about that, and he said he hasn't found any report saying that the President, His Excellency, former President J. Kufuor, approved the recommendations. That's the challenge there.
Okay.
So, but as he has also indicated, he is saying that the recommendations that were given, he's made a very interesting argument. He says the recommendations that were given and the amount stated, indeed, is less than what they were paid, but that it had no presidential approval. And he goes ahead to say that at a later date, you realize that another group, that is the ones that came in the, I think the 6th Parliament or something, that the recommendations that were made, the people were paid more than that, meaning that the president approved something more than the recommendations had actually given. You understand what his argument is? He said that the president approved something more than what was recommended. So it means that it is the president's approval that authenticates it and not the committee's recommendation.
Right.
Now, this is the case in which the crop of persons who are to benefit, their argument is also that, look, this had been approved by former President Kufuor anyway. And as Professor Asare has said, it is very clear, if you read the 71-1, of course, you will see it very clearly that it is supposed to be charged on the consolidated fund shall be determined by the president on recommendations of a committee of not more than 5 persons appointed by the president. So no dispute about that. Then the salaries and allowances payable and the facilities available to the president, the vice, the chairman, and other members of council of state, ministers of state, deputy ministers, being expenditure charged on the consolidated, shall be determined by parliament on the recommendations of the committee referred to in one of this article. And for the purposes of this article, and except as otherwise provided in this constitution, salaries include allowances, facilities, privileges, and retiring benefits or awards. Very broad. So when Parliament approves that of the executive, and the executive approves that of Parliament. That's how it is done. So the controversy here
is it the case now that the succeeding Parliament has now approved what was to be paid to the executive?
That is the controversy that has to be resolved.
Yes.
Because you see.
So do you find that this Auditor General has exercised a lot of diligence in this process?
He has, but I think that he has done so well. I have no problem with but it looks like he also, along the line, turned himself to a court. Along the line.
Dominic has explained that, and you agree. Dominic has explained, and you agree.
Along the line.
You agree that this ought to be the case.
You see, because he gave interpretations, and even the conflict of interest situation that we are talking about.
That's a matter of fact.
All of us, and Dominic, I want us to be very objective in matters like that. You see, when you talk about conflict of interest, you should look at it in a very holistic manner. Otherwise, at the end of the day, you will grind society to a halt because of the way things are run by us. Because if I am entitled to something, it's my entitlement. And I find myself in a certain position where I have a say in determining what belongs to me.
Okay.
Legitimately by the Constitution. Should I say that by virtue of the fact that I'm in that privileged position, I will not be entitled to it because it will be conflict of interest? That should be another question we should be asking ourselves. I have worked for.
So what are you saying? You don't agree?
I've worked for a number of months.
You don't agree with what he says may constitute a conflict of interest because the people who are superintending this process are potential beneficiaries. And I go through the list. I go through the list and I see them. The president now is there. You see the difficulty you arrive at. You have the senior minister. You have Sechi Mensah Bonsu.
Let me draw your
you have President Kufuor.
You understand?
You have Aliyu Mahama. You know, and it's littered, including with Courage Kwashiga, who God bless his soul, and one other, Idris Mustafa, who is gone. Right?
Yeah.
So what's going on? You don't think he's right in this?
I don't know whether you've understood the trajectory of events. You see, let me give you this clear example. Are we saying that those who you have mentioned are the only beneficiaries?
No.
It's a list of how many?
It's a list of 130.
Some of them are out of parliament.
Right.
Some of them are not in employment. So, by virtue of the fact that some beneficiaries are in government, those who are out should not benefit? Are they also suffering the same conflict of interest situation? Those who are outside, who are not within the ambit of the executive today.
He says, first of all, it's invalid.
No, you know, that one too, I have dealt with a similar matter before at the High Court when I was in private practice. And I want to draw attention to it. Professor Asari sought to explain that the Limitations Act. You see, in that particular matter I'm talking about, we're able to establish before the court that, yes, it was after the limitations, but from day one, we had been insisting on our rights.
Explain to my audience first.
For example,
what do you mean by Limitations Act?
For example, the Limitations Act will give you a number of years after which a certain action cannot be taken.
Okay.
If it is land, we know how many. If it is so, in this case, it was 6 years. Now, when we went to court, it was raised by our opponent that we could not bring our rights.
Let the people benefit directly.
Yeah.
If someone owes you a debt,
yes,
and you don't pursue the debt
at all
after 6 years,
that's it.
You have lost the opportunity to go to court to pursue the debt.
If you go to court, all he needs to do is to just raise it.
Okay.
Or somebody comes to occupy your land.
If you have a land and after 12 years,
the person occupies the land.
You have lost the opportunity.
In the case of debt, the limitations decree is very clear that where you write to the
that's where I'm coming to.
And then the debt is acknowledged.
Okay.
Yes. Where it is acknowledged,
then it doesn't apply anymore.
Then time begins to run from the date of the acknowledgement.
Absolutely. Yeah. In that case, we won it. And I was just coming to what my learned brother has said. You see, in that case, we won because we were able to establish that on a number of occasions we made demands and there were replies.
Yeah.
So then the judge said he was going to determine it from the last demand we made and the last reply we received. And that was 3 years. So it did not apply in that case. So in this one, limitations will only apply if for all this while no step was taken, and no acknowledgement, but if it does not, then it means that time will not run, and then the lashes and all that are all applicable only in certain circumstances that the court will determine. But Samson, that's one little point.
They are trying to fix your microphone. Once they fix it, well, I'll bring you back. But I wanted to go to quote specifically the Chapter 6 provision I was referring to, where you have continued to insist that no person can be interpreting the Constitution except the Supreme Court. Article 34, 1 says, the directive principles of state policy contained in this chapter shall guide all citizens, Parliament, the President, the Judiciary, the Council of State, the Cabinet, political parties, and other bodies and persons in applying or interpreting this Constitution or any other law, in taking and implementing any policy decisions for the establishment of a just and free society. So the Auditor General is empowered by the Constitution to interpret and apply any law, including this Constitution, for the purposes of policy making and decisions and for establishing a just and free society. He says, literally speaking, this is invalid, it's unconscionable, it's immoral.
Yes, but you see, again, his determination is not final.
Of course.
That's one thing. And that is, again, something we have to look at. That the pronouncement that will be final will be by the Supreme Court. If they make a determination that this is the meaning, it is not subject to challenge.
So your conclusion is that what? The states should go ahead and pay, or that, like Osei Chairman Sabonsu is saying, the Auditor General has no business doing this kind of research. He should simply go ahead and validate and verify.
From the letter I saw that went to the Auditor General, it was for him to validate. But he wrote an opinion.
Yes.
Okay. Why he wouldn't validate?
Yes.
So he invalidated what he was asked to validate.
Yes.
And he gave his reasons.
Yeah.
Now that's why I told you, even off air, I was very clear in my mind that for me, I suspect that there will be a judicial pronouncement on this. I suspect.
All right.
And that will put issues to remember that he has power under Article 187, to disallow certain expenditure. Now the question is whether he should wait for the expenditure to be incurred before disallowing it. As has happened in some, previous cases. Or he can disallow it even before it has been.
Correct.
So the alleged previous approval, if that one too is wrong, it's not alleged, it's actually factual. Factual. If that one too is found to be, not in conformity with the processes of law, the Auditor General today can disallow and surcharge whoever did it. Okay. All right. Your very final point. And then we have Professor Asare say something briefly about his problem with the Article 70-71 process.
I was just trying to make a point. I think I want to correct a factual statement issue that I indicated.
Once you remember.
It's with respect to this Ishmael Yamson's thing.
Right.
I'm not too sure about the one I told you earlier on. I'm very certain about what they did with respect to Professor Mills, but I'm not too sure about the earlier one. But what I just want to say is that, you see, I think that we are developing our legal jurisprudence. And this matter, for me, if someone is entitled to something, Dr. Yine,
alleges they are entitled to
if somebody alleges that he's entitled to something, as a nation, we should go through it without emotions. I saw a writer by a colleague member of parliament seeking to say that they should not make such demands because there's coronavirus. the Honorable Ablakwa. And I thought that it was below the belt. You see, sometimes let's be realistic in what we do. Let's not be idealistic.
But he's confirming what the Auditor General said.
Let's be idealistic. The point is that if we can argue that there's a difference between you are entitled to, but the timing is wrong, and you are not entitled. So if we determine that they are entitled, we can tell them to shelve it because we are incapable now. But to say that because of coronavirus,
let me have you comment briefly about the other aspect of the Auditor General's work, and then we have Professor Kwaku Asare come in with his concerns with the Article 70, Article 71 process. The Auditor General has conducted another report of the ministries, departments, and agencies, and has found that 7 7,823 ghost names have been paid almost 600 million in salaries. 564.2 million has been paid. Again, how does this happen? A special audit of the Auditor General on payroll and personnel verification exercise had revealed that 21 ministries, departments, and agencies could not account for the whereabouts of the monies I have of the employees that I have spoken about, and that the government, according to the Auditor General, lost the amount I have just referred to because they were paid to such ghosts. The audit verification of the nationwide payroll and personnel verification exercise from June 2018 to January 2020 was to provide an independent assurance on the overall payroll management system. The audit was conducted in line with the auditor's, powers according to the law that gives it. Now, maybe I should just refer to something here where the report showed that employees who had passed the compulsory retirement age were still on the payroll. There were salary grade mismatch and employees without biometric details. The Auditor General attributed these infractions in the payroll management system to weak coordination between the MDAs and the MMDAs on the one hand and the Controller and Accountant General on the other hand. Yes, Dominic. This ghost name thing. When will you...
I think, we have, as a country, invested heavily in systems and processes designed to prevent, ghost names from being on the payroll.
Right.
I think the Give Me system, you've heard of,
right,
is one of those. We've been doing auditing and then validation of employees. We've gone biometric. And I remember when I became Deputy Attorney General, I was asked to go to the Ministry of Finance, and then I got my biometric details taken, and I got issued with a biometric card. So all these processes that we've invested in are designed to prevent fraud in the payroll the payroll
controversial SNATE software
yes,
was also part of
was also part of that. All right. Yet it keeps recurring. Now, something what I would say is that we may not be able to arrest ghosts, but we can arrest human beings, living beings who are responsible for the existence of the ghosts. All right. I think this is a case of peer embezzlement, of public funds. I remember when we were in office, and of course, I'm sure my learned friend here, the DAG, they've continued what we left behind with respect to the National Service, cases. You remember the National Service prosecutions, where the BNI did a very thorough job, very diligent, painstaking investigation that uncovered a lot of, malpractices with respect to the payroll. And there were ghost names. There were people who were on the payroll of the National Service that were actually non-existent employees. And as a result of that investigation, we recovered a lot of monies, from those who were involved. We also arrested and started prosecuting them. I don't know where the prosecution has reached us at now. But I think that is what we should do, stamp our authority effectively in order to eliminate the ghost from the payroll system.
Okay, yes.
Something, who is a ghost? That's a fundamental.
Like Dominic said, we should be asking the one who paid the ghost. That will know who the ghost is.
How does the ghost draw salary and all that? You see, all these are systemic problems that we've noticed.
You and I have discussed this issue before.
Yes, on this platform. And I remember stating that most of it is greed.
Yeah.
I stated that most of it is greed. You see, you have a situation in the past. If you followed events very well, something in the past, it used to be the case that you could even have, at the end of the month, salary of about 40, 50 people transferred to a bank. And then there's a fraudulent manipulation and all the money is cashed and shared amongst people. And those people who actually took the money do not exist, including banks, bank officials. I even remember in one case, an accountant was arrested and all that. They will normally cash that in connivance with certain persons at controller, then they'll meet at a point and share and all. In years past, it happened. And I think those were the reasons why in embarking on the journey to clean our payroll of ghosts and all that, we put in place certain stringent measures to be able to curb this, including but not limited to biometric verification and etc. So what beats my imagination now is how people who have been biometrically verified turn out to be ghosts. That's what beats my imagination. You've been verified biometrically and you've been put into the system and you are being paid.
As for those who are retired and are still receiving, that may not be too much of a difficulty.
After that one, we could just say that it's systemic, isn't it? But you have gone there, you've applied for a job, you've been recruited, you've gone for verification, and then you've been paid. And at the end, it turns out that you are a ghost when you have been verified by a verification machine. It's something that beats my imagination. But sometimes too,
there have been occasions where it has been found that somebody is taking something in the name of the ghost. So that is also a place
there's
to
also something that I want us to look at. You see, in the end, you realize that some of the people, not all, actually exist.
Okay.
And they work. But at the time of verification, they were not present. You have those ones who coming up every now and then. You disclose these figures, and when you go back to the ground, you realize that sometimes what they do is that they say all workers of this department meet on this date at this particular place for us to do verification, whether or not you exist and you are human. So when they go, it is not 100% attendance. So it is from these that they gather these facts.
Okay.
So absentees, for example, who genuinely may be working but could not actually attend the process of verification could be declared as ghosts.
Let's go to Professor.
But the majority of these, by and large, are actually ghosts.
Thank you. Let's go to Professor.
You should arrest the human beings who are behind the
who are behind that. Thank you very much. Now, Professor Kukwasari, there are many who are wondering what's going on in this country. There are teachers who are employed, and it takes 2 years, 3 years, some do more than that, and they have not yet received their first paycheck. And yet we are paying ghosts. Tell us what you think about this, and then briefly deal with the problem you have with the Article 70, 71 issues. Sorry.
Samson.
Yeah.
I think I agree with my friends Dominic and Joseph. Look, these ghost problems are as old as the Republic itself. Every year, the Auditor General does the work and he reports that they are ghosts. We talk about it for a few days and then we move on our merry ways. Nothing ever happens. So to me, it's no longer interesting that they are ghost workers. What is interesting for me is who is creating these ghosts and why don't we go after them?
Right.
When you look at the report, I will highlight 3 ministries. Ministry of Education alone has over 5,000 ghosts, and it is alleged that payments to these ghosts exceed 200 million. Then Ministry of Health, 1,300 ghosts, payments exceed 127 million. And then Local Government Ministry, 548 ghosts, payments exceeding 34 million.
Ministry of Information has only 1 ghost. That can be a genuine error.
And conduct a forensic audit of the ministries. I'll go beyond a payroll audit and do a forensic audit with an intent to figure out what specific schemes are enabling these ghost payments, who are the ringleaders of these schemes, so that we can administer a blow to them that will strike fear in anyone who intends to bring up a ghost scheme to other departments. Now, when you look at the report, it looks like the voters register. Retired workers not terminated, you know, in the voters register, we have dead people not removed. Duplicate social security numbers, okay, like duplication. paying people who have not been biometrically verified, even though that is not supposed to happen. Personation, that is using other people's qualification or using other people's voters' card to vote. One bank account that allows about 30 or 40 people to deposit their paycheck. That is a no-no in any payroll system.
All right.
Several suspected fraudulent certificates used for employment, over-leveraged workers. There's a policy that no worker be allowed to deduct half of his salary for installment payments. But that's not followed. They have invested in an Oracle platform. This is a beautiful platform, and you can configure it in ways that enable some validation controls. But they don't do that. Why don't they do that? They don't do that because they want these things to persist. And so it's a systemic problem that is linked to the earlier problem that we described. Because you see, people see the tone at the top. And when they are unhappy with the tone at the top, well, they are not at the top, so they cannot have ex gratia, they cannot be paid 20 years back pay. So they also design their own schemes. And unless we figure out how to stop the problem at the top, these other things at the bottom will continue. Now, on the Article 71...
No, just a second. Even the chieftaincy ministry, that small ministry, we cannot ensure that there's no ghost name there. There are 23 ghost names there. As an accounting professor, what do you think should be done beyond the other softwares you are recommending to avoid these things happening?
That's what I was talking about, the validation controls. When you buy the Oracle platform, it is set at a default value. So the controllers and accountant general's department should go in and configure it and say, for instance, don't pay unless you are biometrically verified. The only reason somebody can pay if it's not biometrically verified is because you have not turned on the validation control.
Okay.
These validation controls are there for a reason, but people subvert the control system by deliberately not turning them on. That's why all these things are happening.
Okay.
If you have a good accountant who turns these things on, then all the control problems will disappear.
Okay.
Then what you have left is the fraudulent problem.
Okay.
The
Prof,
fraudulent problem
it's okay
is where
now.
I call for a forensic audit.
Let's spend the next 4 or 5 minutes to hear your concerns about the Article 70, 71, matters.
Samson, if you look at Article 71, it is an anti-corruption article. It's an anti-corruption article.
Okay.
Why do I say that? Read it carefully. It says the president sets up a committee. The committee makes a recommendation. The president approves the package for the parliamentarians, and the parliamentarians approve the package for the executive.
Right.
You see that?
Yes.
Why? Why is the president approving the package for parliamentarians and the parliamentarians approving for the executive? Because we are afraid that if the president approves his own package and parliamentarians approve their own package, then they are going to just give themselves some hefty bonuses that the country cannot sustain. Now,
on the other hand, if the president treats the parliamentarians well, they will also treat him well.
Exactly. I was going to go to that.
Okay.
That if you just stop at what I read, then you are not really interpreting the Constitution carefully. You are missing the anti-corruption element in that article. That article also implies that the president and parliament should not be allowed to collude to take care of themselves. That's what it means. And then thirdly, the people themselves have to exercise some oversight of what is going on. When you put all that together, it basically means no president or parliament should be allowed to determine their own package. So if I'm the president today and I set up a committee and the committee comes up with some recommendations that I accept, that should take effect prospectively. I should not benefit from that, and the parliamentarians that I work with should not benefit from that. So this whole thing should always apply prospectively, and we are doing it so backward that we are now allowing it to happen retroactively. Second, an intervening election must take place before the recommendations take effect. So if I am the president in 2016 and I approve something, that should take effect not in 2016, maybe not even in 2020, but in 2024. Otherwise, you are going to defeat the whole purpose of Article 71, which, as I said, is an anti-corruption article, making sure that people are not taking care of themselves. So the idea that whenever the president is living, he can recommend certain things that take retrospective effect, that is so wrong. There's just no organization in the world where people's compensation package are determined after they have finished working. No. When you come in, your compensation package is known, and that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So when we bring in a class of MPs, their package should be whatever was there when they got elected. Yeah. And then if they decide, and I think that these recommendations and these committees should not be set up every 4 years. Maybe they should be set up every 10 years. And then their recommendations bind for the next 10 years. Then after that 10 years, we set up another committee, and that committee makes its own recommendations.
All right.
The way we are interpreting it is just funny. Every president comes in, he sets up his own committee. The committee takes care of the president and the parliamentarians. It defeats completely the whole purpose of Article 71.
Thank you very much.
We are literally interpreting Article 71 in a way that no employer would do. And the reason this happens, Samson, is because we, the people, are not too vigilant. You know, in the US here, let me tell you something. The Congress can increase its own salary, but they tried it before, and the next elections, it was bloodshed. Just about every congressman lost his seat. The people were so upset. So now what happened? Even though they can increase their pay, they never touch it. Congress's package has not been adjusted for about 15 years. Why? Because they are afraid of the people. Our politicians are not afraid of us. They know that we will just talk. I mean, Prof will come on Newsfile, he will make some good points, but nobody will, take it seriously.
Interestingly, Professor Kokwasari, the two MPs here are adding them with you. They are supporting the point you just made and the recommendation you just made. I suppose that is the reason we should not throw out the Constitution Review Commission's recommendations. An emoluments commission that should be taking care of these things, so that we don't do scratch my back, I scratch yours. What do you say about his recommendations? What do you say about it? You were all nodding and saying yes, yes.
I think
I want my audience to hear you loudly.
If I were sitting on a judicial panel with Professor Asari on this matter, I would have said that, I agree totally, absolutely with what Madeleine
has nothing useful to add.
And I have nothing more useful to add. But let me say one thing respecting the retroactivity, the issue of retroactivity. Something, the problem we have is that parliamentarians often come in, an executive comes in, and they start work without knowing what their salary, and emoluments are.
Right.
All right. So you come in and you are being paid the salaries and emoluments that pertained at the time that you were elected.
Okay.
So you are sworn in on the 7th of January. You are not given of course, because we are not appointed, we are appointed by the people. So we are not given an appointment letter.
Okay.
But you are not even communicated to with respect to how much you are entitled to by way of salaries and emoluments.
All right.
And so, towards the end, when people know that they are now exiting, when the president, of course, you know, he has an election to contend. Then we think that, oh, it's now time to set up a committee to make recommendations about the salaries. And that is how come arrears are often a problem.
All right.
You see, because if you know your salary, you know, from the onset, there's no reason why, and I mean, the issue of arrears will come in. So I think to solve the problem of retroactive payments that Professor Asade has eloquently, you know, pointed out, we should, you know, make sure that immediately we come into office, you know, I mean, from day one, the salaries and emoluments are
right. Thank you very much. Yes, in a minute.
Without amending even the Constitution, as you have rightly indicated, without even amending it, what I think we should do is that nothing ties the president from coming up with this committee in January, when we are sworn in, so that by February, March, this is in place.
All right.
And then you start taking your salary.
Okay.
Because you see something, we may be grappling with a bigger problem in future. We don't even know what may happen in future if we continue to have it the way it is. Because somebody says he's entitled to something, another person says you are not entitled to. If it had been determined from the very day, in fact, people we employ, what do? In the appointment letters, we state what they are entitled to.
Okay.
But we go in there, we are not aware of how much we are entitled to. It is only when we are exiting that we get to know and all that. All right. And it's a practice that has continued. Either we do the constitutional amendment, or I think that we should have it done in January as soon as we are sworn in.
Thank you very much. How many times has this been advocated? For as long as I became politically aware. But it's there, nobody bothers. Is it because there's some benefit to it? Okay, so the case you referred to, I am reliably informed that the Court of Appeal, the one at the Court of Appeal, as to their payments, the MPs, former MPs, a judgment will be delivered in June. So hopefully they will get to know. So why are they in court and then they are seeking through the sort of back door to have the monies paid? And that's interesting. The question that the court is to determine more critically is whether the committee can make provision for pension for parliamentarians, deputy ministers, and ministers when the Constitution does not. That it appears to be the bigger issue to look at. We are taking a break, but before we do that, an MP Podo sent me a message, and he suggests that the President Mills may have been wrong if President Kufuor approved the report, and then he decided when he took over to now seek to vary that report. So I think others have said here that would be difficult in a court of law. Kweku Bako Jr., who has always been so helpful, rare artillery support to me when I sit here, says that there was and there is only one Yamson Committee report. Yamson Committee report was set up by the President Mills on March 31, 2009. It presented its report on May 31, 2009. Chenry Hesse Committee produced two reports, an interim one, June 2008, and the final one, December 2008. Chenry Hesse Committee was set up by President Kufuor. Before all these reports were the Green Street Committee set up by President Rawlings. In spite of the apparent rejection of the Chenry Hesse Committee report by President Mills, there is evidence to the effect that members of the Parliament 2001-2005 were paid some monies on the account of salaries and rent based on the Chenry Hesse Committee's report, which was presumed rejected and replaced by the Yamson Committee. This is contained in a letter signed by Dr. Kwadna Dufour and dated January 5, 2010. Another evidence of the Chenry Hesse Committee report being applied is Chief of Staff Newman's August 24, 2011. And he has shared some of those letters with me. He concludes that if the rejection of the Chenry Hesse report had indeed stood, why were payments made on the basis of it? That's an intriguing point. Or did the Mills administration beat a retreat? Some critics questioned the constitutionality of Mills's rejection of that report. And I think that is a matter of public knowledge. We take a break here, and when we return, we will find out whether you belong to the majority of the 5 judges in the Amidu H case, or you belong to the minority, the dissent position of the 2 who say that someone who came to office when he was 66 should not be allowed to continue in a public office where the Constitution says the public officers must retire compulsorily at 60, or if they got a contract at 65. Professor Kweku Asare has written, and he says the Supreme Court majority made some very wrong theories and analogies. He says the interpretation that they did undermines constitutional theory, and it is a misguided, purposive interpretation. The Supreme Court, however, is of the view that Dominic Ayine and people like Professor Asare are dealing with a solitary provision, narrow interpretation, not a holistic interpretation, which is very dangerous and does not allow our Constitution to grow. We'll be right back, and joining us to add to that discussion will be the other Deputy Attorney General, Dominic Godfred Yeboah Dame. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guest, Dr. Dominic Ayine and Dindiok Kwemka Joseph. Of course, Professor Stephen Kweku Asare is on Zoom with us, and joining us via phone will be Dame Yeboah Godfred, who is also a Deputy Attorney General. So let's begin by going to Professor Kweku Asare. And I deliberately do that because this is Dominic's case. Even though he was not the lawyer who litigated the case in the courtroom, it was Tony Later who did. You may have heard him a bit, and his views will remain what he has been canvassing in the court. But Professor Stephen Kweku Asare can be said to be sitting outside and just have observed what has gone on so far.
Yes. I have been given the opportunity to
start.
I brought my case before. Yeah.
Okay.
But
right.
But if no, I mean you can give, let Prof start. Okay. And then we can.
Never mind. I think we can start with you. So, the special prosecutor Martin Amidu was sworn into office February 2018. He was born on the 6th of September 1951. So by the date he was sworn in, he was 66 years. That's why Dominic Ayine went to court and said that Parliament had made a law. The law they had made, that's the Special Prosecutor's Office of Special Prosecutors Act. They had made that law pursuant to the constitutional provision, and by that law added to the list of civil service provided in the Constitution. Once that was the case, Martin Amidu, if you like, is holding an office of civil service. And the Constitution says, Article 199(1), that you should retire at 60. The Supreme Court disagreed with him, but they have very cogent reasons why they did so. Let's now explore. You say this is bad.
Yes.
Explain.
Okay. So, Samson, I thank you very much. I want to put this case in its broader context. As you rightly pointed out, Mr. Martin Amidu was sworn into office in February 2018. At the time that he was sworn into office, he was 66 years old. And in fact, before that, I had discussed with the Honorable Muntaka Mubarak, our minority chief whip, issues relating to the vetting of Mr. Martin Amidu. And it was when he gave me the CV of the nominee that I detected that there was an age, qualification issue. And I told Muntaka that this was, the Honorable Muntaka Mubarak, that this was problematic. He said, why? And I referred him to the public service chapter of the Constitution. And as you rightly pointed out, Article 199(1) makes the compulsory retirement age of persons working in the public service 60 years of age. And thereafter, if they are to be granted a post-retirement contract, that contract should be for a maximum of 5 years, 2 years at a time, and then anyhow, not more than 5 years. And when I explained that to him, he said, what do we do? I said, well, you are supposed to vet him. Maybe you should put that question to him. But in my case, I think that it raises a novel constitutional issue. And that as a result of the novelty of the constitutional issue, I think possibly I would have to go to the Supreme Court to test it. Now, I also had certain doubts about the law as a whole. In the course of deliberations at committee, I kept pointing out that you can't take the power of the Attorney General under Article 88 of the Constitution and give it to someone and say that that person is independent of the Attorney General. And I said that because of the sui generis character of the Attorney General's office, doing that will be unconstitutional.
In law, when you say sui generis, what do you mean?
No, I mean it is, the Latin expression for something that is, how will I say, there is something
novel.
No, not novel as such, but something that exists in and of itself.
Okay.
All right. And so I took the view that we should not, be taking the Attorney General's powers of prosecution and giving them to the special prosecutor and making the special prosecutor independent of the Attorney General. So I raised a number of constitutional issues in the course of the debate. And so when this age issue came, I was very excited about the possibility of testing it in the Supreme Court.
Right.
Now, it isn't that this was, the first time that the issue of age was being tested. All right. In the case of Yovu Yivo, an Attorney General, the Supreme Court had to determine whether or not police officers who had turned 55 2 weeks upon the coming into force of the Constitution should retire under the then Police Service Act, that is Act 350, or they should retire under Article 199(1) of the Constitution.
Right.
Because they, as plaintiffs, were arguing before the Supreme Court that they have attained an enhanced age of retirement by reason of the coming into force of the Constitution. The Attorney General then, incidentally, that was Dr. Obeda Samoa, and his deputy, the Honorable Martin Amidu, were contending before the Supreme Court that the mandatory age of retirement was 55 under the Police Service Act, Act 350, and therefore the police officers should retire at 55 because that was the mandatory. This was Martin Amidu and his Attorney General arguing for the mandatory application of Section 8(2) of the transitional provisions to the 1992 Constitution. And so the Supreme Court took the view that was put forward by the plaintiffs in that case. Now in Yovu Yivo, interestingly, Nene Amegache, JSC now, was then Samoko Jetos Jr. and they represented, the plaintiffs. But my case My case is distinguishable from Yevu Yubo on the basis that Yevu Yubo dealt with persons who were already working in the public services of Ghana.
Okay,
Right.
just hold on briefly for me. No, hold on briefly for me. I will come to you. Understand that your mic is has a few issues. So we'll fix it and come back. And he was on the point of referring to a 1993 case. And in that particular case, it's actually the Supreme Court, the judge, who led the decision, who brought both of them their attention to that case. None of them apparently had, paid attention to that issue. All right. So as we try to fix your microphone, let me bring in Professor Asare. Almost said Professor HKC Prempe. Professor Asare. Okay, so let's perhaps begin where you say in your article that what the court did was a misguided purposive interpretation. And in fact, they did a certain comparison and said that the Auditor General, that's one of the cases that Dominic Ayine referred to in the Apia Ofori case. The Auditor General, the NCC chairperson and their deputies, they were using them to say, whilst they are public officers, just like Martin Amidu, they are not subject to retire at 60 years because the Constitution clearly provides when they should retire. It is the Auditor General that there is another law, that's the Audit Service Act, that says he should retire at 60 years. But even though he enjoys the privileges and conditions of a Court of Appeal judge, then you have NCC boss, you have Electoral Commission boss, you have other independent constitutional bodies like Shraj boss, but they don't retire at 60 because the Constitution provides when they should retire, or there are other laws that provide when they should retire. The administrator of the Common Fund, they use that to say Dominic is wrong in saying that once you are a public officer and your office is one under public service by the Constitution, you must retire at 60. Why do you disagree with that point of view?
Samson, very well. Let me say this is a very useful debate or discussion. I'm glad you are doing it because people often forget that the judiciary is an organ of government and they must be accountable. People must know what is going on. We hold parliamentarians accountable. We hold the president accountable. But often the judiciary is invincible to most people, largely because they write, technical language, and it's good that you are using your platform to break things down so that people can understand what is going on. Before I comment on the question that you asked, let me make 3 quick observations. I was a little worried by how long this case took. It took about 2 years plus. That's not good enough, because if you are challenging whether somebody is qualified to hold an office, and it takes you 2 years to adjudicate that, well, the person may very well have completed the term of office, and then what? The problem with delaying is that it puts the judges in a difficult situation, because if they say it's unconstitutional, then they look kind of negligent for allowing somebody to occupy a position for 2 years that was not qualified to do that. And so almost it creates an unconscious bias to say that it's constitutional. I also think the third thing is that as a country, we need to do pension reform.
That point, the MP Isaac Amu took a matter to court that he was the rightful person to occupy the seat in Ayawaso West Wuogon. His case was determined when the MP who was illegally there had already finished the term. The court
exactly.
The court
and there are many examples like that.
The court ruled that he was a rightful MP. So how it delays doesn't affect how they rule. Is that not the case?
You know, remember that one was an appellate case. It wasn't the original court. It was a high court case that was traveling up the chain.
All right.
But this is a Supreme Court case which is not subject to appeal. And I'm not saying it influenced them. I'm just saying the potential is there.
Except that by the time they had given the decision and said he's the right MP, it was almost a useless decision because he couldn't become an MP. He couldn't go there because the time was finished. Go ahead.
That's the problem. That's the problem. The third point, Samson, is let's do some pension reform because there are too many different pension ages for different people, and it's causing a lot of confusion. And as you can see, even the Supreme Court was a little confused by it. Now, the fourth thing is I don't agree a lot with Chief Justice Akufo on her approach to legal education, but I love her jurisprudence. And I think a new superstar is born. When I read Justice Doji's opinion, it was just brilliant. Yeah. And so that's good. That's good for the country.
That's a dissenting opinion.
It's good for the country that we have somebody like her taking the place of Justice Akufo. Now, let's go to one last point, and again, that comes from Justice Doji. She again emphasized that the parliament should stop excluding people who owe allegiance to countries other than Ghana. Yeah. Just because something is in the constitution doesn't mean parliament can do it. Because constitution is drafted by framers and all of us vote on it in a referendum. Parliament is just a class of transient legislators, and they cannot do what the constitution itself has done or undo what the constitution has done. Now, on this particular case, let me say that the reason I was shocked was that the law that the Supreme Court was interpreting is what we lawyers will call a bright line rule. It is like the Constitution saying to be a president, you have to be 40 years. And then Parliament makes a law which says, well, but if you are big enough, then you can run for president if you are 35. And then it goes to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says yes, because the Constitution itself gave an age, and so Parliament too can give an age. That is just so wrong. When I look at the opinion issued by the majority, I found 10 mistakes, and that's being charitable. There were more than 10 mistakes. 10 mistakes, that's being charitable. You stated the holding, but the important thing is not about the holding or who won or who lost. This is not about Dominic. It's not about Martin Amidu. It's not about the Attorney General. It's not about the President. It's about the Constitution. It's about constitutional principles. It's about stare decisis. It's about the corpus juris. It's about the body of law that we are creating to teach in the law schools. What was the reasoning behind their holding? I'll go through 10 of them, and you will see that they are funny. They are very funny. Number one, the court says, well, Article 199.1 is not a clear prohibition, inference, or language. There's nothing, it's not so clear that it bars Parliament. And later on, I'll read Article 199 for you to see whether it's clear or it's not clear. Number two, Parliament has the flexibility and authority in appropriate cases to prescribe a different retirement age as the exigencies of the job requires. Think about that. The Constitution has said something, and you are saying, no, Parliament can do something else. Number three, if the Constitution has different retirement ages, then Parliament too can give its own age. That is a misunderstanding of the difference between Constitution and a statute. A misunderstanding between framers and parliamentarians. Number 4, this is the funniest one that I read. When I read, I said, oh my God, how can this even be in a Supreme Court opinion? It says, if the plaintiff did not complain when some act was passed in 1993, why is he complaining now? It's actually in there, in the report. Number 5, Parliament must be free to adapt. Maybe there's COVID and they should be able to set the Constitution aside and do whatever they want. Number 6, Parliament has implied power. I don't even know what that means.
Residual power. Residual power. It's there in the Constitution.
Agency law that has no relevance whatsoever to what we are talking about. Number 6, Parliament used its residual power. Now, the Hansard itself says that Parliament used its power under Article 191D. And the court is saying something else, that Parliament used its residual power under Article 298. How can Parliament use a residual power on a matter that the Constitution has a voice on? The Constitution has prescribed something. So residual power does not come in at all. It is plain error. It is just so wrong to be talking about residual power in a matter like this. Number 7, the special prosecutor position is analogous to some other offices. And so if the Constitution has allowed those other offices to be retiring at 70, then Parliament too can allow the special prosecutor to retire whenever they want. Number 7, the Constitution must not be interpreted narrowly. It must be interpreted purposively. But they didn't interpret the Constitution purposively. The whole purpose of having a constitutional retirement age is to take the question from Parliament. We don't want parliamentarians and politicians to be messing with the retirement age. That is why it has been constitutionalized. Otherwise, we would leave it to them to do it. But we know our history, starting from the Nkrumah regime, where the public service was supposed to be Africanized, and then later on it was politicized, almost always because the politicians are seeking public servants who are loyal to them. And so with that in mind, the framers decided when it comes to retirement, except where the Constitution itself has made an exception, the retirement age for anyone who is in the public service is 60, case closed. So in this case, you have to ask 2 questions. Is the office of the special prosecutor part of the public service? The court itself says yes. Parliament says yes. So that's not in dispute. That resolves the question. Once the office is part of the public service, the retirement age for them is 60. Now, the court looks at all kinds of ages in the Constitution, and it doesn't give a framework, or it doesn't seem to be understanding what the constitutional drafters are doing. When you actually look at the Constitution, it's very smart. What it has done, there are 2 types of people in the Constitution in terms of retirement age. What I call elected officers or at-will officers, and then for cause. For cause means you cannot dismiss these people without a very good reason. The at-will or elected officers typically have no retirement age. The Constitution doesn't talk about the retirement age. So if you want to run for president and you are 100 years old, you go do it. The voters will decide, and if they are not happy with you, then they'll fire you. So there's no need for us to put a retirement age on that. Then we also have political appointees. Political appointees, they serve for a term. The voters don't like the person who appointed them. That's it, they are gone. Then there is another group called the public corporations. But the public corporations who are set up as commercial ventures. So we want those, even though they are state-owned enterprises, we want them to be run like commercial enterprises. So to be competitive with the private sector, let us not impose any age requirements on them. So the court asked, why is it that we power authority doesn't have a retirement age. Well, the Constitution answers that they don't have a retirement age because it's a public corporation that is set up as a commercial venture. So you put that aside, then is the for cause. The for cause, I put people in 3 buckets. Either you are a Supreme Court justice, or you are a Court of Appeal justice, or you work for SHRAJ, or you are a member of the Public Service Commission. In those scenarios, the Constitution itself says, okay, these guys, they will retire at 70. Then there's another bucket, the High Court, the Deputy SHRAJ people, the Deputy Public Service Commissioners, they retire at 65. So those are the only exceptions. Everybody else will retire at 60. That is why the Auditor General in the Audit Service Act retires at 60. And that's why in the Appeal of Ori case, the court said, look, the Auditor General, even though he's an Article 70 appointee, his retirement age is not specifically in the Constitution, and therefore he must retire at 60.
Okay.
This is to me a very, 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 very simple question.
Hold on there for me, and let me bring in Godfred Dame, who also prosecuted this matter and has graciously agreed to assist us in understanding the decision. Godfred, thank you very much for making time to join us.
Right, Samson, thank you very much.
What do you say about the difficulty that people like Professor Kweku Asare have in understanding what the Supreme Court's majority or the decision went through to come to the conclusion that the position of Dominic Ayine was wrong? They took us through a number of public offices and indicated that even though these public office holders are public service persons, they have different retirement ages. So for Dominic Ayine to insist that once the office was created as a public service, the retirement age must be 60. Why do you think people can't seem to understand that this is good, law from the Supreme Court?
Well, fine. Well, let me just wish warm regards to my good friend Dr. Ayine and Honorable Penka, and of course Professor Asare, who I happen to be counsel for in the challenge of the Constitutional Review Commission's work in 2015. So I know them very well, and I like all of them. But the point is that, and it must be placed on record, that the Supreme Court did not go through any difficulty whatsoever in rationalizing the conclusion it did. Indeed, the numerous examples it stated was actually an attempt to indicate clearly that they don't state anything new. And as far as I'm concerned, the ruling only affirmed and endorsed the position prevailing at law in Ghana. That is why the court had to go through great extent to show examples of various statutes since 1992. Now, something in the laws of Ghana, there is standing on the statute books a law known as the Laws of Ghana Revised Edition Act. It was passed in 1998 at 562. That law provided in Section 1, Subsection 1 thereof, for the appointment of a statute law revision commissioner by the President, Constitution, the Council of State, and Minister for Justice. That law did not provide for any tenure at all. On that basis, the Attorney General then, Dr. Obedasamu, appointed Vincent Cyril Richard Arthur Charles Crabb, a gentleman we all know as VCRC Crabb, to that office. VCRC Crabb's appointment was renewed by his successor, Nanadan Kwekufadu, who has been the President now. Successive Attorney General and Ministers for Justice, including Joe Gatti and Betty Molidusu, continued VCRC Crabb's appointment. At the time VCRC Crabb was appointed, it was well over 70 years. And he continued in office until it was well over 90 years before retiring from that office and eventually dying at the age of 94. So clearly, it tells you that if indeed Dr. Ayine, with all respect, would want to look at the law impassionately, and clearly, objectively, who come to the conclusion that it is not uncommon, neither is it illegal to appoint a public officer, and the emphasis is on public officer, who is over the age of 60 years. And that has actually been the source of, with all respect, the confusion that was manifest in the kind of submissions that were filed in court. And my view is that indeed, if the submission by the plaintiff in that case, in the Arena and General, were to be appealed, clearly it would have amounted to an endorsement of a position totally alien to the Constitution of Ghana, which, if appealed, would have disrupted the efficient running of public administration in Ghana. Because really, the case was founded on the constitutional fallacy. It was a complete fallacy and a false premise to proceed to say that the Constitution prescribes a retiring age for all public officers. No, there's not at all.
Okay, so make note of that.
Characterize that position.
Make note of that. No, make note of that.
We told you, I mean, explicitly. I mean, I cannot allow him.
No, make note of that. You are here. You have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to respond. Please make note of that. Thank you.
If Dr. Ayeni says that what I'm saying is false, may I quote from paragraph 7 of the amended of case filed by Ton Luther in court. It says, by reason of his age, second defendant, at that time, second defendant was Martin Amidu, who was subsequently struck out. Second defendant is not qualified under Act 9592, but the Attorney General appointed by the President of the Republic and approved by Parliament for the position of Special Prosecutor. This is because by his appointment, he would become a public officer within the definition of Article 295, and under Article 109 plus 1 of the 19th Constitution is older than the constitutionally prescribed retirement age of all public officers, which is 60 years. But that is wrong. There's no such thing as a compulsory retiring age of all public officers. That's the point. Now, that's something that the case was built on a constitutional fallacy, and it must be demonstrated clearly. Now, you see, the Constitution again, with all respect, does not also prescribe for how public offices in general must be created. The Constitution rather provides in Chapter 14 for how the public services, and the emphasis on services, of Ghana will be set up, and then directs that Parliament may by law prescribe for the establishment of the public services, and also indicates in Article 195 Clause 1 how an appointment to an office in the public service should be done. So you see, if I would agree that indeed the reason why the Constitution does not prescribe for how public offices generally can be created in Ghana can be found in Article 295. The definition of public office clearly is distinct and must be distinguished from that of public service. And the Constitution says so. Public service, in its narrow definition in Article 295, has many broad elements and very defined characteristics. Beyond the simple fact of drawing a monument from public funds, there is also a requirement in Article 195 for the person to be appointed by the President in accordance with the advice of the Governing Council of the service concerned. And that advice must have been given in consultation with the Public Service Commission. Article 295 indeed says that public services includes service in any civil office of government. And government, of course, has been defined in the same Article 295 to mean any authority by which the executive authority of Ghana is duly exercised. But public office, however, is broad and all-encompassing. If you look at Article 295, it says that the only factor is that the person should have been drawing a monument from public funds. It implies that the President, the Vice President, the Speaker, members of Parliament, the Commissioner on Human Rights, and various chief executive officers of state-owned enterprises and board members of a number of public corporations are all public officers. However, in Ghana, there is no such thing as a retiring age for public officers in general. The point we made clearly is that indeed, by Act 959, that's the Public Office of Special Prosecutors Act, Parliament had carefully set up an office and specified conditions regarding the holding of the Office of Special Prosecutor as well as the Deputy Special Prosecutor. And then Parliament, again, in the same Act, specified a different manner of appointment for other staff of the Office of Special Prosecutor. So you see that Section 13.1 says, Section 13.3, it says the Attorney General shall nominate a person qualified for appointment as Special Prosecutor by the President, subject to approval of the majority of all members of Parliament. The same provision goes in Section 16.2 for the appointment of the Deputy Special Prosecutor. But then, when it comes to other staff, it is indicated clearly, appointment of other staff, that they shall be appointed in accordance with Article 195 of the Constitution. So you see that there was a deliberate effort. Appointment is in Section 21, appointment of other staff. The President shall, in accordance with Article 195 of the Constitution, appoint other staff of the office that are necessary for the proper and efficient performance of the functions of the office. So clearly, you saw that deliberate distinction drawn. And I'm saying that's what made the point that indeed, where is the prohibition in the Constitution that Parliament cannot create a public office and then within the specific confines of the statute that has been passed, specify a particular requirement or a particular manner of appointment for the leader of the office, as well as also specifying different tenure of office for the other staff. It's all there. So we must clearly have the understanding that the Constitution defines public office and public service differently.
Okay.
And when account is taken of this, you will then come to the irresistible conclusion without any difficulty at all that the plaintiff's case in the Aini matter was very simplistic and followed the constitutional fallacy.
Right. So hold on.
I'm saying that indeed, this was not the first time that Parliament of Ghana had enacted an act of Parliament specifying such arrangements. That is why I alluded first to the Laws of Ghana Revised Edition Act 1998 at 562, under which Justice B.C. R.A.C. Cap was appointed when he was over 20 years, hold office for over 20 years until he died at the age of 94. Then also we can make reference to the District Assembly's Common Fund, which we have earlier on alluded to. The Labour Act 2003 at 651. If you look at Section 143, it talks about tenure of office of members of the Commission. So the members of the Commission shall hold office for a period of 4 years and are eligible for reappointment. Is this unconstitutional? Indeed, going by Ini's argument, then it will imply that if I am appointed a member of the Labour Commission, when I'm 1 year...
Now just hold on briefly. Hold on briefly there. Now, Dominic, the question is, did you not put up a position that from what the court has canvassed is not supported by the law? The position that once the OSP Act creates Martin Amidu's office as a public service and adds to the list of public services in the Constitution, his retirement must be 60 years, and therefore he's unqualified, and they should say so. The Supreme Court, like Dami has also referred to a bit of it, they took time and took you through a number of retirement ages. They made distinction between political public office holders and the not the bureaucratic, service holders who are serving. They spoke about judges. Judges are part of the list of
something you can ask.
Part of the list of the public service. I will deal with them. Several institutions are part of the public service, but the persons in these offices do not retire at 60. Court of Appeal judges don't retire at 60. Supreme Court judges don't retire at 60. High Court judges retire at what? Is it 65?
65, yeah.
65. Yes. Then they give you all the others.
I think you are taking too much time. We are all lawyers. Yes. We have read the judgment.
So yes.
I think what happened, and this is why I interjected when my learned friend, the Deputy Attorney General was speaking. The point is this: the section of our pleadings that he referred to did not say that we were asserting that there is one uniform retirement age for all public office holders.
The judgment said that's what your position was.
He mischaracterized that position in his response, in his legal arguments, and we said that was not the issue we're bringing before the court. And that is why Justice Doji pointed out that we had said explicitly that wasn't the issue. We had never said that there was one retirement age for all public office holders. And in fact, Samson, I would encourage you to go, if I can send you the legal arguments filed by Tony later. In fact, Tony later took his time.
I have both of them.
Yes, but you saw in our, legal arguments that we pointed out quite clearly that there were different retirement ages for different public office holders. This is an argument that we made, and it is very disingenuous on the part of the Deputy Attorney General, and then on the part of the court to say that we sought to, say that there was one uniform retirement age for all public office holders. Our case was very simple. It was that the OSP, the Office of the Special Prosecutor, is an Article 191D office. And there was plentiful evidence to that effect. Being an Article 191D office,
that's a public service.
It is part of the public services of Ghana, strictly and properly so called. He is just not an ordinary public officer. He is not a political appointee, a minister. He is not a judge. He is not a, what do you call it? A chairman, yes, an independent constitutional body and so on. But he is one appointed pursuant to Article 191D of the Constitution, which is located in Chapter 14. So his office is part of the public services of Ghana. And our argument was that, okay, the officer is a product of the office. You must first create the office by law before the office holder can be appointed to occupy it. So being a product of that office, he was governed by the rules of retirement that govern that particular office. And that is under Article 199 of the Constitution. Now, what he put before the court was that we had said that there was one retirement age for all public office holders. That is not true. There is no evidence at all in our pleadings that that is what we said. Secondly, the distinction that he sought to draw between public officers and public services, okay, what do you call it, as I said it some time ago, an exercise in sophistry, because that wasn't what we were, putting before the court, okay? He set up a straw man. The Supreme Court adopted his straw man, knocked it down, and said that they've won the case. The reason why we said Martin Amidu was appointed pursuant to a public service office created under Article 191D of the Constitution is very simple. The Attorney General herself, his boss, when she came to Parliament, acknowledged that this was an Article 1901D office. All right? The chairman of the Constitutional, Legal, and Parliamentary Affairs, in justifying why we were creating a board, said this was an Article 191D office. And we made the hands up. Yeah, no, I'm coming.
That's not in doubt.
No, I'm coming. No, please. Your colleague has taken a lot of time. Let me. Pemka. No, please. Let me finish and then you can respond. All right. Now, Samson, come to think of it. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that even this evidence we have placed before the court was not available. All right. What services is the Office of Special Prosecutor going to provide? They are providing legal services. Prosecutorial service is legal service, and the legal service is part of the public services of Ghana. Look at Article 190 of the Constitution. I think you have it here.
No, but
right?
my question to you very briefly is this. You say it's an office created under 191.
Yes.
191 is the public services of Ghana.
Look at 191D.
I'm coming. 191 says the civil services of this country, the public services of this country shall include the civil service, the judicial service. Now, the judges, they don't all go on retirement at 60.
You see, that is where you
they use that example.
No,
Did
please,
they not?
Please. The judicial service is different, when it comes to the appointment of judges, and the Constitution itself makes that very clear.
Okay.
All right. Let's take the judicial secretary. The judicial secretary, or any person working as a registrar, is governed by Article 90 of the Constitution.
Okay.
So they retire at the age of 60. Now let's even look at this. The DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, right? Appointed under the legal services, retires at 60. So why is the DPP different from Martin Amidu? Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay.
And the whole idea that the Supreme Court said he was analogous to an Article 70 appointee is one of, as Asari said, one of the funniest reasons to have been given. The reason is simply because Article 70 vests the President of the Republic with power to appoint certain listed officers. And then in 71E, it then says that and such other offices, created under this Constitution or by an act prescribed by Parliament. All right. Now, Parliament is not being given power to create an office under 70. Parliament is given power to create the offices specifically mandated under the Constitution. In the case of the Public Services of Ghana, 191D, and then in the case of the DACF, that is the Common Fund Administrator, Samson, look at Article 252, Clause 5 of the Constitution. It says that Parliament shall determine not only the terms and conditions of office of the administrator, but also the tenure of office. So the Constitution even provides that Parliament can enact law to determine those ones.
Okay.
All right. So wherein lies the exercise of residual power?
I see.
When you see that the Constitution has provided for it. So all the examples that they cited, all right, if you come to Bank of Ghana, look at the chapter on look at Article 183 of the Constitution. All right. When it comes to EOCO, that is where I even saw that the court did itself a lot of disservice, because the EOCO was enacted pursuant to Article 190 of the Constitution. Go back to the history. Go back to the Hansa. And that is why the executive director of the EOCO, all right, retires at 60.
Okay, hold on. Godfrey, yes.
I think that certain words, with all respect, have been used here in the court in description of what the Supreme Court did. And for instance, Dr. Aine just said that one of the funniest reasons. I think that such language, with all respect, ought to be deplored.
No, but the judgment is out there. The judgment is out there. It's subject to criticism.
No, please.
This is not a matter that's still pending before them.
You are not want to teach me what to say about judgment.
We can say that a decision is absurd. It's unreasonable.
Right. That is even an absurd decision. An absurd decision.
Listening to Professor Asari, he made reference to Justice Doji's judgment and described in very glowing terms. As far as I'm concerned, very material parts of Justice Doji's judgment actually supported the case for the defendants. Indeed, if you look at page 69 of Justice Doji herself.
She dissented and said the majority decision was wrong. Why do you say she supports them?
But I'm saying that even the reasoning, with all respect, the reasoning of Justice Doji actually, if you look at it, was manifestly supportive of the case of defendants. And it shows some contradictions. It says that there's no doubt or controversy as far as about definitions are concerned that public office embraces a wider scope of public officers, including public officers in the public service. Article 190 basically provides in clear terms institutions that are classified as the public service of Ghana. Clause 4 of Article 199.4 describes public office holders in the public service created under Chapter 14 of the Constitution.
Okay.
So this actually shows that when, as I submitted in court, that indeed when we say public officers under Chapter 14, it must be construed as a term of fact. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
It's actually referring to public officers appointed within the context of Chapter 14,
and
not all public officers generally.
Okay.
No, but all public officers to be retired as
gentlemen, I'm sorry, but once again, I don't know where the time went. I'm sorry, but our time is up. It has been a very revealing and interesting discussion, but this judgment obviously is a judgment that will be subjected to further discussion going forward. But your colleague is on the line. Sorry, my guests have been
because you were two and I was.
My guests have been Dr. Dominic.
I needed to draw your attention to something. And
my guests have been
allowed me to draw the attention.
Dr. Dominic Akuntinga Ayina, and my people will punish me for having said that wrong. I'm being rushed from all angles. He's the MP Boga East and chairman, Subsidiary Legal Legislation Committee of Parliament. Joseph Dindiok Penka is MP Timpani and Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice. And somebody very interestingly says, the three of us from the same place are sitting on the show. It doesn't change anything. Also, Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare, fellow CDD Ghana and D&D fellow for Public Law and Justice. Godfred Yeboah Dame, Deputy Attorney General and Minister of Justice, has just left us on the phone. Don't go anywhere today. Keep your channels and your dials on Joy, because you have the Beyond the Lockdown COVID-19 impact on sports. That's tomorrow, Sunday, at 7 p.m. You can enjoy that. Also, coming up is the Joy Sports Link. Right now, Nathaniel Arthur will be interviewing Stephen Appiah. Thank you. My name is Samson Ladi Anyanini, and as always, my outfit, it's by Latida. Thank you all.